Some children are born silent, but when they finally speak, they choose their truth. The ballroom glittered like a frozen dream. Crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across marble floors polished to perfection, and Emily Carter stood at the edge of it all, invisible in her borrowed black uniform, her tray trembling slightly in her hands as she tried not to draw attention from creatures who weren't supposed to exist, creatures with eyes too bright, movements too smooth, smiles that never reached their gaze. And at the center of them all sat Lucien Voss, the Vampire King, ancient and unreadable, his presence pressing against the air like a storm that never broke. But tonight it wasn't him that held the room in quiet tension. It was the child beside him, small, pale, and perfectly still, Princess Lily Voss, a girl who had never spoken a single word in 6 long years, not to doctors, not to scholars, not even to her father, and yet her golden eyes moved, slowly, deliberately, drifting past nobles and guards and courtiers until they landed on someone no one would have noticed, someone no one should have noticed. Emily, the poor waitress who didn't belong in this world, who had spent the last 12 hours working double shifts just to afford next week's rent, who lowered her gaze quickly, hoping the child hadn't truly seen her. But the moment refused to pass. The air thickened, the music faltered, and then the girl moved, just a small shift, a fragile hand lifting into the air, trembling as though it carried something heavier than itself, and every vampire in the room felt it. Something ancient, something waking, something impossible. Emily's breath caught as that small finger pointed directly at her, not past her, not near her, but at her, and before anyone could speak, before anyone could move, the child leaned forward slightly, her lips parting for the first time in her life, and in a voice so soft it should have been lost to the silence, she whispered, "Mama." And the world didn't just go quiet. It stopped, completely, utterly stopped. Glasses froze mid-air. Conversations died before they could form, and even the flickering candlelight seemed to hesitate. As if reality itself needed a second to understand what had just happened, Emily stood there, heart pounding against her ribs, unable to breathe, unable to think, because that word wasn't just a word, it was a claim, a bond, something far older than reason. And across the room, Lucien Voss slowly rose from his throne-like chair, his movements controlled, but his eyes no longer cold, something deeper flickering beneath the surface, something dangerous, something alive. And when he looked at Emily, really looked at her, it felt like the weight of centuries had suddenly shifted in her direction, as if her ordinary life had just been erased in a single heartbeat. And she didn't understand why, she didn't understand how, but she knew, with terrifying certainty, that nothing after this moment would ever be the same again. No one spoke, because no one knew what rule had just been broken, and in a world built on ancient laws, silence was often more dangerous than chaos. Emily could feel every eye on her now, not just watching, but measuring, judging, calculating what she was, and what she meant. Her fingers tightened around the tray until the metal pressed cold against her skin, and for a second, she thought maybe if she did not move, if she did not breathe, this moment would undo itself. But then she felt it, a small hand wrapping around her sleeve, gentle, fragile, and impossibly warm. Princess Lily had stepped away from the throne. No one stopped her. No one dared. The child who had never walked toward anyone now moved with quiet certainty until she stood inches from Emily, her golden eyes searching her face as if looking for something only she could see. Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely forming a whisper, "Your Highness, I think you made a mistake." But the child only tilted her head, then pressed her small cheek against Emily's arm, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The reaction was immediate, a ripple through the room, like invisible glass cracking. One of the nobles finally found his voice. "This is unacceptable. A human cannot be acknowledged by royal blood. The bond is sacred. It cannot be random." But another voice, colder, older, cut through the tension. "Unless it is not random, unless it is recognized." Emily's heart stumbled over itself. She did not understand any of this, not the word, not the way the air felt heavier around her, not the way the guards had subtly shifted their positions, forming a barrier that kept others away from her, and yet boxed her in at the same time. She looked down at the child again. Lily had not let go. Her fingers curled into the fabric of Emily's sleeve, as if afraid she might disappear, and for reasons Emily could not explain, she found herself lowering the Trey, placing it aside and gently brushing a strand of silver hair away from the girl's face the moment her fingers made contact, Lily exhaled a soft, relieved sound, not quite a word, but something close, something that made the chandeliers tremble faintly, as if responding to a frequency no human should hear. And across the room, Lucian Voss watched every movement, his expression unreadable, but his stillness unnatural even for him, centuries of control held in place by something dangerously close to breaking. He took one step forward, then another, each movement deliberate, until he stood directly in front of Emily. The temperature seemed to drop, not from fear, but from presence, from power that did not need to be shown to be understood. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice low, calm, but carrying through every corner of the hall. "Emily Carter," she answered automatically, her throat dry, her instincts screaming to run, even though she knew she could not. His gaze did not leave her face, as if searching for something buried beneath her skin, beneath her name, beneath everything she thought. "She was my daughter, has never spoken," he said slowly, "and she has never chosen anyone until tonight." The word chosen echoed in Emily's mind louder than anything else, chosen for what she did not know. But before she could ask, before she could even process the weight of it, Lucian's next words sealed something unseen into place. "You will not leave this place," he said, not as a threat, not as a question, but as a fact. And for the first time, Emily realized the truth. She had been pulled into something ancient, something powerful, and whatever it was, it had already decided she belonged to it. The word belonged echoed in her mind long after the music failed to return, and the guests slowly stepped back as if distance could protect them from whatever had just begun. Emily did not resist when the guards approached, not because she trusted them, but because she understood something deeper. Resistance here meant nothing. The world she knew had already slipped out of reach. Princess Lily still held her hand, small fingers curled tightly, as if Emily was the only thing keeping her grounded. And that quiet dependency sent a ripple of unease through every watching eye. They moved through the grand hall in silence, past towering pillars and endless corridors that seemed carved from shadow and time itself. Emily tried to memorize everything, the exits, the turns, the distance between doors, but it all blurred together until she realized this place was not meant to be escaped, it was meant to be endured. Finally, they stopped at a set of tall doors that opened without a sound, revealing a private chamber, vast and dimly lit with soft golden light. The moment Emily stepped inside, Lily released her sleeve, only to take her hand instead, guiding her forward like she had done this before, like she knew this space belonged to her. Emily's voice came out unsteady. "Your Highness, I really think there has been some kind of misunderstanding." But the child only looked up at her, and for the first time, there was something different in her expression, not emptiness, not silence, but recognition, as if Emily was not a stranger at all. Across the room, Lucian entered without warning, his presence filling the space before he even spoke. Every instinct in Emily's body tensed, yet she could not pull her hand away from the child. He stopped a few feet from them, his gaze dropping briefly to where their hands were joined, then rising slowly to meet Emily's eyes. There was no anger there, no immediate threat, only a controlled intensity that felt far more dangerous than either you felt it, he said, not asking, not guessing. Stating a truth. Emily hesitated. "I do not know what I felt. I just did not want her to be alone." The admission slipped out before she could stop it, and something in the room shifted. Lucian's expression did not soften, but it changed almost imperceptibly. Like a memory brushing against something buried deep, Lily's grip tightened, and then she spoke again, not clearly, not fully, but enough to break the silence. "Once more, Mama." The word was steadier this time, less fragile, and it struck something unseen in the air, like a key turning in a lock. The lights flickered softly, and the faint outline of symbols began to glow beneath the surface of the marble floor, ancient patterns forming and fading as quickly as they appeared. Emily took a step back instinctively, but Lily followed, refusing to let go. Lucian exhaled slowly, as if confirming something he had not wanted to believe. "This is not a mistake," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "The first word is never a mistake." Emily shook her head, her heart racing. "I am not her mother. I have never even seen her before tonight." But Lucian stepped closer, closing the distance between them, his voice lowering. "Then explain why she chose you when she has rejected every soul in this world for 6 years. Emily had no answer, only the growing realization that this was no coincidence, no accident, and whatever truth lay beneath, it was something far more complicated than kindness or chance, something that had been waiting for this exact moment to reveal itself. Emily's silence stretched longer than it should have, because every answer she could give sounded wrong in a place where nothing followed human logic. She slowly shook her head again, trying to ground herself. I do not know anything about your world. I am just a waitress. I work 2 jobs. I barely make rent. I should not even be here tonight. But Lily's fingers tightened, as if rejecting every word. The child took a small step closer, pressing herself against Emily's side like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there. And that quiet certainty unsettled something deeper than fear. It felt like being recognized by a stranger in a way that made no sense. Lucian watched the interaction without interruption, but the tension in the room thickened as if invisible forces were shifting around them. You are not just anything, he said finally, his voice steady, but carrying a weight that made Emily's chest tighten. There are laws older than memory in my world, and one of them is this: the first word of royal blood binds truth to existence. Emily frowned slightly, not understanding what that meant. Binds truth, she repeated, and Lucian's gaze darkened, not with anger, but with something far more complicated. It means my daughter cannot lie in her first word. She cannot choose incorrectly. She cannot be mistaken. The air seemed to press in closer with each sentence, and Emily felt her pulse quicken. Then what does that make me? She asked quietly, and for the first time. Lucian did not answer immediately. His eyes flickered briefly to Lily, who was now watching Emily with an intensity that felt almost protective before returning to her face. That is what we are about to find out, he said. At that exact moment, a sharp knock echoed from the door, and without waiting for permission, it opened, revealing 3 figures dressed in dark formal attire, their presence colder, sharper than the others Emily had seen before. The one in front stepped forward, bowing slightly. My king, the council has convened. They request your presence immediately. Lucian did not look away from Emily. Tell them I am occupied, he said, but the man hesitated, something unusual for someone standing before him. They insist this concerns the child and the human. Emily felt Lily stiffen beside her, and instinctively, she placed a gentle hand over the girl's smaller one. Without thinking, the contact seemed to calm her instantly. Lucian noticed everything, his expression sharpening for just a second before settling back into control. Then they may enter, he said quietly. The atmosphere shifted again as the figures stepped inside, their eyes locking onto Emily with a mixture of curiosity and something colder, something calculating. One of them spoke without hesitation. This situation cannot be allowed to continue unchecked. A human cannot be integrated into royal lineage without verification. The risks are unacceptable. Emily felt the words hit her like a weight, even though she did not fully understand them. And yet she knew one thing clearly: she was no longer being seen as a person. She was being evaluated like a problem to be solved or a threat to be contained. Lily moved closer again, almost hiding behind Emily's arm, as if sensing the shift in tone, and for reasons Emily could not explain, she found herself stepping slightly forward, placing herself between the child and the newcomers, not out of defiance, but instinct. Lucian's gaze flickered at that movement, something subtle but unmistakable changing in the way he looked at her. The lead council member continued, there are only 2 possibilities. She is what the child believes she is, or she is something far more dangerous, and until that is determined, she should be isolated. The word isolated echoed in the room, and Lily's grip tightened instantly, a soft sound escaping her, not quite a cry, but enough to make the air respond again, faint cymbals flickering beneath their feet, like a warning. And Lucian finally spoke, his voice calm but absolute. No one touches her, not until I understand what she is. And in that moment, Emily realized something that sent a chill through her entire body. Whatever this bond was, it was not just protecting the child, it was protecting her too. The word isolated did not fade. It lingered in the air like a line that could not be crossed, and Emily felt it settle somewhere deep in her chest. She did not fully understand the rules of this world, but she understood that word. It meant being taken away. It meant losing control. And before she could think, she tightened her hold on Lily's hand, just slightly. The reaction was immediate. The child leaned closer, her small fingers gripping tighter, as if she had been waiting for that reassurance. The council members noticed everything. One of them narrowed his eyes. Her presence is already influencing the child's responses. This is exactly why she must be separated and studied. But Lucian did not move. His gaze remained fixed on Emily, not on the council, not on the room, only on her, as if every answer he needed was written somewhere beneath her expression. Say you are not afraid, he said suddenly, his voice quieter now, but far more intense. Emily blinked, caught off guard by the question I am, she answered honestly, because pretending would be pointless in a place like this. I do not understand anything that is happening, and I am afraid of what you might do next. There was no tremor in her voice, no attempt to soften the truth, and something in the room shifted again, subtle but undeniable. Lily looked up at her, and for the first time her expression changed, not just calm, not just detached, but relieved, like she had been waiting to hear that exact honesty from someone. Lucian's eyes flickered for a fraction of a second, then stilled again. Fear is not weakness, he said quietly. It is clarity, and clarity reveals truth. The council member stepped forward again. This is irrelevant, my king. The law is clear. If the bond cannot be explained, it must be controlled. The human must be removed until verification is complete. Emily felt the word removed hit harder this time, and before she could stop herself, she spoke again. What happens to her if I leave? The question was simple, but it landed heavier than anything else had. Lily's fingers tightened instantly, and the faint glow beneath the floor returned, stronger this time, more defined, as if responding directly to the connection between them. The council hesitated just briefly, and in that pause Lucian answered. She will return to silence, he said, and this time there was no distance in his voice, no detachment, only a quiet certainty that carried something deeper than authority. Emily's breath caught. She looked down at Lily, who was watching her with those steady golden eyes. No fear, no confusion, only expectation, as if she already knew the answer Emily was going to give. And in that moment something inside her shifted, not logic, not reason, something instinctive, something that had nothing to do with this world or its rules. She exhaled slowly, then lifted her head. If staying here is what keeps her from going back to that silence, then I am not going anywhere. The words settled into the room with a weight that even she did not fully grasp, but Lily reacted instantly, her grip relaxing just slightly, her shoulders easing, as if a tension she had carried for years had finally lifted. And for the first time since entering this place, Emily saw it clearly. The child smiled. It was small, fragile, but real, and it changed everything. The council members exchanged glances, unease replacing certainty, because this was no longer just a situation to control. It was something else, something that did not fit within their laws, and Lucian saw it too, his gaze shifting from Emily to his daughter and back again. And when he spoke, his voice was no longer just the voice of a king. It was something more personal. Then you stay, he said simply, but the way he said it carried a promise and a warning at the same time, because whatever this bond was, it had already begun to rewrite the rules of his world. The moment the king said, then you stay, something invisible settled into place, like a door quietly locking behind her, and Emily felt it not as fear, but as finality. There was no returning to the life she had known, no late shifts, no counting tips under dim kitchen lights, no pretending the world was simple, because it was not simple anymore. It was something else entirely, something watching her, something measuring her. Lily did not let go even as the tension in the room shifted. The child stayed close, her small hand warm against Emily's, as if anchoring herself to something real. While the council members stepped back slightly, their confidence no longer as absolute as before. This changes nothing, one of them said carefully, but there was hesitation now, a fracture in their certainty. We will proceed with verification immediately. Lucian's gaze did not move. You will proceed with caution, he replied, because if you are wrong, the consequences will not be limited to her. The implication hung heavy, and for a moment no one spoke. Then slowly the council inclined their heads, not in agreement, but in acknowledgement. Before withdrawing without another word, the doors closed behind them with a quiet final sound, and the room felt different, not safer, but more contained, like the storm had been pulled inward instead of passing through. Emily exhaled slowly, only then realizing how tight her chest had been. Lily shifted slightly, pressing closer, and for the first time Emily allowed herself to respond fully. She crouched down, carefully bringing herself to the child's level. Hey, she said softly, her voice gentler now. You are really not going to let me go, are you? Lily blinked once, then lifted her free hand, placing it lightly against Emily's cheek. The touch was soft, almost curious, but the moment it happened, Emily felt it again, that strange pull, not painful, not overwhelming, just there, like something recognizing her from the inside out. Her breath caught, and she instinctively stilled, not wanting to break whatever fragile connection had formed across the room. Lucian watched in complete silence, but something in his posture had changed, not relaxed, not softened, but focused, as if every detail mattered now. Lily's lips parted again. The sound that followed was not a full word, not yet, but it was closer, clearer than before. Ma, the syllable barely formed, but it was enough to send a quiet ripple through the room. The lights dimmed slightly, then steadied, as if responding to the attempt. Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing. This was not normal. None of this was normal, but the child was trying. She was reaching for something, and somehow Emily was part of it. Why me? She whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, and Lucian answered from where he stood. Because she sees something you do not. The words settled deeper than she expected. Emily looked up at him, confusion and uncertainty written clearly across her face. I am nobody, she said again, but this time it sounded less certain, less grounded. Lucian stepped closer, stopping just a few feet away, his presence no longer distant, but not overwhelming either. Not nobody, he said quietly, just unknown, and in my world unknown things are either rare or dangerous. Emily held his gaze for a second longer than she should have, then looked back at Lily, who was still watching her with that quiet, steady focus, as if waiting, as if expecting something more. And for the first time, Emily realized this was not just about staying or leaving. This was about becoming something she had never planned, something she had never even imagined. And the most unsettling part was not the fear or the uncertainty. It was the small, undeniable feeling growing beneath it all, that somehow this was exactly where she was meant to be, even if she did not yet understand why. The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt like something waiting, something watching for the next move, and Emily could feel it in the way the air seemed to hold its breath around her. Lily had not moved, her small hand still resting against Emily's cheek, as if memorizing the shape of her face, the warmth of her skin, the reality of her presence. And for a moment, everything else faded. The palace, the king, the rules, all of it became distant compared to the quiet connection between them. You are real, Lily whispered again, this time, the words clearer, not just sound, but meaning, and Emily felt her chest tighten, because that was not just a child speaking. That was recognition, something deeper than memory, something older than logic. Emily forced a small smile, though her heart was racing. I am real, she said softly, I promise. Lily's eyes searched hers for a second longer before she nodded once, as if confirming something important, something only she understood. Across the room, Lucian did not interrupt, but his attention sharpened, every word, every reaction measured carefully, like pieces in a game that had just changed its rules. What do you remember? He asked suddenly, his voice calm but precise, and Lily's gaze shifted slowly from Emily to her father. The transition was subtle, but the room reacted instantly. The faint glow beneath the floor flickered again, responding to the shift in focus. Lily hesitated, her fingers tightening slightly in Emily's sleeve before she answered in a quiet, steady voice. Light, she said, and Emily felt the word more than she heard it, like it carried something beyond sound. Lucian's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Light, he repeated, and Lily nodded again, this time more certain, warm, she added, then looked back at Emily as if the answer was standing right in front of her. Emily frowned slightly, trying to understand. You remember, Light? She asked gently, and Lily shook her head no. Then she lifted her hand again, placing it over Emily's heart. You. Emily's breath caught the room, seemed to tilt just slightly, not physically, but emotionally, like something had just shifted into place in a way no one expected. Lucian stepped closer, now his presence stronger, but still controlled. Explain, he said, but it was not a command, it was a request, directed not at Emily, but at the child. Lily looked between them, then back at Emily, her expression focused in a way that felt far too aware for someone her age. You were there, she said slowly, each word forming with effort but certainty, and Emily's mind went completely still. There, she echoed, not understanding. I do not know what you mean. But Lily did not look confused, she looked sure, small, but unwavering, like she was remembering something that had been hidden away for a very long time. Before the silence, she said, and the words landed like a quiet shock through the room. Lucian's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with realization, something ancient flickering behind his calm exterior. Emily shook her head instinctively. I have never been here before, I have never seen this place, I have never met you. But even as she said it, doubt crept in, not because she believed it, but because something about the way Lily looked at her made it harder to dismiss the possibility completely. The child's grip softened slightly, as if sensing the conflict. Then she leaned closer, resting her forehead gently against Emily's arm, and whispered something so soft it almost disappeared. You forgot. The words barely existed, but they were enough to send a chill through Emily's entire body. Not cold, not fear, something else, something like a door inside her mind shifting, just slightly, not opening, not yet, but no longer completely closed. And across from them, Lucian Voss stood completely still, his gaze locked onto Emily with a focus that felt deeper than before, because for the first time, he was not just questioning what she was, he was questioning what she had been all along. The words "you forgot" did not disappear, they lingered between them like something waiting to be understood, and Emily felt it settle deep in her chest, not as a memory, but as a pressure, like standing in front of a door she did not know how to open. She slowly shook her head again, her voice unsteady. "I do not remember anything like that. I would know if I had been here before. I would remember you. I would remember all of this." But even as she spoke, the certainty in her voice felt thinner, weaker than before. Lily did not argue. She did not insist. Instead, she simply looked at Emily with quiet patience, as if waiting for something to return on its own, as if forcing it would break it across from them. Lucian took another step closer, the distance between them narrowing until the air itself seemed to tighten, his gaze never leaving Emily's face. "Memory is not always reliable," he said calmly, "especially when it has been taken or hidden." Emily looked up at him sharply. "Taken," she repeated, and the word sent a ripple through her thoughts, something uneasy, something that refused to settle. "You think someone erased my memory?" she asked, but Lucian did not answer. Immediately, his attention shifting briefly to Lily, then back to Emily. "Not erased," he said slowly, "concealed, and the difference matters." The room fell silent again, but it was no longer the same silence. It carried weight, now meaning. Emily's pulse quickened. She tried to push the thought away, but it clung to her. "What would be the reason for that?" she asked, and Lucian's expression hardened slightly, as if the answer was not simple, as if it carried consequences. "Because what you were might have been dangerous," he said quietly, "or valuable." Emily exhaled sharply. "That does not make sense. I am not dangerous. I am not anything special." But Lily moved again, stepping forward, placing both small hands against Emily's arm, as if grounding her, as if reminding her of something she could not see. "You are," she said softly, and the certainty in her voice made it harder to dismiss than anything Lucian had said before. Emily swallowed, her thoughts racing through every memory she could grasp. Her childhood, her jobs, her struggles, everything felt normal, ordinary, nothing that suggested hidden power or forgotten pasts. But beneath that logic, something else stirred, something quieter, something that did not argue, only waited. "What if," she whispered more to herself than to them, "what if I really do not remember?" Lily's expression softened slightly, not in sadness, but in understanding, like she had expected that answer all along. "You will," she said simply, then rested her head lightly against Emily's side. The contact sent another subtle shift through the room, the faint glow beneath the floor returning once more, but this time it did not flicker. It held steady, as if something had stabilized, as if a connection had been confirmed. Lucian noticed it immediately, his gaze sharpening. "The bond is strengthening," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. Emily looked down at the light beneath her feet, then back at Lily, then at Lucian, and for the first time the fear she felt was not about being trapped or controlled. It was about the unknown within herself, something she had never questioned before, something she had never needed to question until now. "What happens when I remember?" she asked, and Lucian held her gaze for a long moment before answering, his voice low and steady. "Then we will finally know whether you were meant to be found or meant to be hidden, and the difference between those two things will decide everything." The difference between being found and being hidden did not sound like a choice, it sounded like a verdict, and Emily felt it settle over her like something already decided. Lily remained close, her head resting lightly against Emily's side, as if she had no doubt about where she belonged, while Emily's thoughts spiraled between disbelief and something far more unsettling, the possibility that this child was not wrong, that somewhere beyond her memory there was a truth waiting to surface, and she had no idea what it might cost. Lucian's presence remained steady, a constant in the shifting tension of the room, but his silence now carried weight, not control, not authority, something closer to anticipation, as if he had spent centuries waiting for answers, and suddenly they were within reach. Emily looked down at her hands, then back at Lily, then finally at Lucian. "If I remember something," she said slowly. What happens to her? The question mattered more than anything else. Lily's fingers tightened slightly, as if she understood the importance of it. Lucian did not hesitate. "She will not return to silence," he said, and for the first time, there was something absolute in his tone, something that did not depend on rules or uncertainty. Emily nodded faintly, then exhaled, because that was enough for now. That was all she needed to hear. Lily shifted again, lifting her head and looking up at Emily with that same steady gaze. "You will stay," she said, not asking, not hoping, stating something she already believed. Emily hesitated for just a second, not because she wanted to leave, but Because she understood what staying meant. It meant stepping into something unknown, something that might change her in ways she could not undo. But when she looked at the child, she saw none of that fear reflected back, only trust, only quiet certainty. And that made the decision feel less like a risk and more like an answer. "I will stay," Emily said softly. And the moment the words left her lips, something in the room responded, not violently, not suddenly, but undeniably. The faint glow beneath the floor brightened just slightly, the air settling into a strange calm, as if a balance had been restored. Lucian noticed it immediately, his gaze sharpening, then softening in a way that was almost imperceptible, but real. "Then it begins," he said quietly. Emily frowned slightly. "Begins what?" But before he could answer, Lily moved again, lifting her hand and placing it gently over Emily's chest, directly above her heart. The contact was soft, almost careful, but the effect was immediate, a flicker of something, not a full memory, not even a clear image, just a sensation, warmth, light, a voice calling from somewhere far away. Emily's breath caught her hand, instinctively rising to cover Lily's, as if to steady herself. "Wait," she whispered, her mind reaching for something just beyond her grasp, but it slipped away as quickly as it came, leaving only the echo behind. She looked up at Lucian, her eyes uncertain. "Something is there," she said quietly. "I just cannot reach it yet." Lucian held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Once you will," he said, and there was no doubt in his voice, not uncertainty, not hesitation, only certainty, because whatever had been hidden was already beginning to return. And as Emily stood there with the child still holding onto her, she realized something she could no longer ignore. This was never just about why Lily chose her, it was about why she had been chosen at all. And somewhere in that answer was a truth powerful enough to change everything, not just for her, not just for the child, but for the entire world she had just stepped into.